What's an NSFW fact about history that we don't get to hear too often? During wartime, some armies would wipe shit on their spears so that when they stabbed/slashed enemies they'd get that extra poison damage. The deadliest female serial killer in US history had murdered 35 people with an axe by the time she was 18 years old. In 1511, a bunch of people in Brussels took part in the building of 110 vulgar snowmen as an act of protest. When Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of Henry VIII, was taken from Sion Abbey to the Tower of London to prepare for her execution, she sailed in a barge down the River Thames. She passed under London Bridge, where the severed heads of her alleged lovers Thomas Culpeper and Francis Derham were waiting for her, displayed on spikes, rotting and picked at by birds. Witches were more often mutilated than actually burned. In ancient Egypt they held a fertility festival each year, and at this festival it was the pharaoh's responsibility to strip down and jerk off into the Nile. Victor Hugo, the guy who wrote, among other things, Les Miserables and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, was a sex addict. He claimed he and his wife had sex 9 times on their wedding night. When she got bored with this, and I don't blame her for that, it just all sounds way too much, he proceeded to go and bang everyone and everything that caught his eye. How about the time that NASA funded a study about dolphin communication that ended with one researcher giving a dolphin that was high on LSD a handjob? The author of Frankenstein lost her virginity on top of her mom's grave. Pope Alexander VI might have held orgies where he kept track of men's orgasms while he held the position of pope, and also definitely had an infidelity fetish, especially with women whose wedding he'd officiated. He had 4 kids with one married noblewoman, and at least another 3 to 5 outside of that. Benjamin Franklin had a fart fetish. There are letters that prove this where he writes to a woman about her flatulence. Benjamin Franklin was also an emphatic fan of having sex with older women and would write letters to others recommending it. He said they had experience and enthusiasm. Edit, typo. Edgar Allan Poe married his 13-year-old cousin when he was 27. In the 1880s, James Jameson, heir to the vast Jameson Irish whiskey fortune, purchased a 10-year-old African girl just so he could draw her being eaten by cannibals. A French president died from a blowjob. Edit. Well, he had a heart attack while getting a blowjob. But the way I said it first sounded more funny in my head. Sparta is a treasure trove for this kind of thing. Sparta's marriage rituals involved the kidnapping of a girl, then dressing them in men's clothing and shaving their heads so they looked like a man before having sex with them. There are disputed claims that both Napoleon I's and Rasputin's members were, well, dismembered during their respective autopsies and have traveled the world extensively, possibly farther than either men ever did, as well as being shown in multiple occasions to the public. On a similar note, it is well known LBJ had a massive Johnson, and Rasputin's girthy schlong was venerated amongst high-class women of his time. No wonder he's indeed Russia's greatest love machine. French modern philosopher Michel Foucault, in addition to studying crime and deviance in a criminology sense, also applied his theories on punishment to his fascination with BDSM, having also written a number of kink-based works. He eventually moved to San Francisco and partook in gay bathhouses, notorious for casual sex. He eventually caught HIV, and some have speculated, it may be written somewhere, that he purposely contracted it as some sort of poetic social commentary. Oddly, I learned this stuff while getting my administration of justice major and studying corrections, lol. During the rape of Nanking there were accounts of Japanese troops forcing families to commit incestuous acts. Sons were forced to rape their mothers, and fathers were forced to rape their daughters. King Tut's first wife was his half-sister. But she also may have been his full sister, and even at one point may have been his stepmother. Genghis Khan, after defeating the Russians, laid thousands of them bound and stacked like cordwood, and built a platform above where he and his generals feasted. All the while the men below suffocated and were crushed to death. Source: Dan Carlin's excellent The Wrath of the Khan series. All the documentaries you see about hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt neatly avoid showing you the fertility rites where the pharaoh's phallus is inseminating the land. According to records, King Jejung of the Shilla Kingdom had an 18-inch dick. Edit: I think the focus should be that they wrote it down as such, not that he actually had one, which sounds greatly exaggerated. Anne Frank's diary was censored for her privacy. She wrote many entries about masturbation, and her bisexuality. Her father cut those out. Ways popes have died. Pope John VII was bludgeoned to death by the husband of his mistress when he caught them in flagrante delicto. John XIII met his end, so to speak, when a cuckolded husband rammed a poker up his bottom. Pope Leo VII suffered a fatal heart attack during sex with a page boy. Not NSFW but James Buchanan, U.S. President, never cohabitated with his wife, and after his death several love letters were found that he had written to his assumed lifelong male partner. Not sure if anyone else mentioned it, but when at a Salvador Dalí museum, they mentioned that he had a shit fetish. He was alienated from a lot of the modernist movement and even kicked out of some art society he was in because they found out. And I'm not talking anal, I'm talking literal 2 girls 1 cup fecal stuff, lol. The Japanese used to put Chinese babies on their bayonets and pose for a pic. Lyndon B. Johnson was quite a vulgar president. He has been reported to have carried meetings into the restroom if he had to use the restroom during the meeting. He also referred to his Johnson as Jumbo, and you can easily find recordings of him making a phone call to a tailor requesting his pants be not A with extra room in the area. Edit, change the wording. The Romans would often include bestiality as halftime shows for their gladiator matches with strange animals up to and including swans. Sarah Sally Hemings was an enslaved woman of mixed race owned by President Thomas Jefferson. Multiple lines of evidence indicate that Jefferson had a long-term sexual relationship with Hemings, and historians now broadly agree that he was the father of her 6 children. Hemings was a half-sister of Jefferson's wife, Martha Jefferson. Edit, long-term sexual relationship means raped. Simone de Beauvoir was a French feminist author, professor, and Jean-Paul Sartre's kind of girlfriend. She was fired from her job in 1943 for abuse of minors. She had been seducing her underage female students for them to sleep with her and with Sartre, who had an appetite for virgins, and they wrote to each other making fun of these girls. Hitler had 2 genital mutations, an undescended testicle and a rare condition called penile hypospadias, in which the urethra opens on the underside of the penis. He used a drug cocktail including bull semen to try and boost his virility. That dude was all messed up. NASA tried to teach dolphins English, and during the experiment they not only gave dolphins LSD, but a female scientist jacked off a male dolphin to relieve him so they didn't need to take breaks. 1984, during the Iraq/Iran war, Iraqi forces had laid hundreds of exposed electrical wires in the Majnoon marshes which they knew the Iranians had to cross. Those wires were all snaked together and connected to large electrical generators. When Iran attempted to cross the marsh with boats, Iraq used just enough concentrated artillery to force the Iran soldiers out of the boats and walk through the marshland. As soon as that happened, the Iraqis fired up their generators and electrocuted thousands of Iranian soldiers in an instant. That's not the worst part. The Iraqis then sent in a road building detail, and collected all of the Iranian dead, and stacked the bodies like cordwood, 5 corpses high, and 5 across, covering them with lime, and then a bunch of sand. They used the Iranian dead to build a road for their trucks to cross the marshlands. The sheer hatred, madness and precision needed to pull this operation off, as well as carry it through, is just horrific to think about. Romans loved depicting sexual acts on many everyday items, like oil lamps, combs, bowls, etc. You often see images of people fucking like porn, but in daily life. The CIA once considered sending the Soviets condoms that were large labeled small. You convinced them that the US was well endowed. It is speculated that the crotches part of the armor, codpiece, was enlarged, not to make the knights and kings' junk look bigger, but to alleviate the pain caused by syphilis when their genitals made contact with the metal pieces.